Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Dan McCaleb, Chief Content Officer at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week in Illinois in Focus, we'll discuss the corruption trial of longtime former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, as jurors are now a full week into deliberations. We'll also talk about a lawsuit the U.S. Department of Justice filed against the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and Cook County over their sanctuary policies. All that and more when we come back with Illinois in Focus.
Tired of being in the dark about what happens day to day under the dome in Springfield? Do you want to be more informed in the decision-making process? If so, you need Blue Room Stream, a live and archived video streaming service that provides access to government meetings and events. With Blue Room Stream, you can watch elected officials in action, holding them accountable, and having your say on issues that matter most to you. Blue Room Stream is the perfect way to stay informed about Illinois state government and to be a more engaged citizen. Become a subscriber today at blueroomstream.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. As we record this on Thursday, February 6th, jurors are deliberating the fate of longtime former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan and co-defendant Michael McLean, and they've been deliberating for a full week. Madigan has pleaded not guilty to 23 corruption-related charges. Federal prosecutors allege that Madigan used his power in state government to steer no-work or little-work jobs to his close allies in exchange for passing legislation favorable to the bottom lines of ComEd and AT&T Illinois, and also steering work to his private Chicago law firm. Joining me to discuss this is our man at the courthouse, the Everett McKinley Dirksen U.S. Courthouse in Chicago, reporter James Telemonte. Jim, any new information from the jury today?
You know, it's been very quiet here as we've gotten deep into the week. There haven't even been notes. We were getting a few notes from the jury to the judge. None of them really central to his instructions or the case. They were mainly scheduling related. There was one asking for office supplies like sticky notes and highlighters. We haven't had any communication. We see them come in the morning, and then they leave kind of in groups at the end of the day, and that's it. There's been nothing. So we really don't know how much progress they're making. We haven't heard of any kind of problems, so that's a good thing, I guess. And it's, as you're waiting, you do encounter some of the attorneys and parties involved. You may see here and there. Amar Bachu, one of the lead prosecutors in this case, reminded some of the reporters sitting near the courtroom that, remember, it took a long time in the George Ryan case, the former Governor Ryan and his corruption case. And at some of these cases, it can take a long time. And especially this one, Madigan's facing 23 counts, and count one, especially the racketeering conspiracy charge, is complicated. There are sub areas to fill out on the verdict form for the jurors. And then you have a second defendant, Michael McLean, his longtime associate, Madigan's, who was also a state rep at one time before becoming a lobbyist. We do a lot of that in Illinois, state rep or state lawmaker right into lobbying. And so McLean's got 6 counts against him also, and the defendants are being considered separately. So you could have a situation where, one count goes in favor of one defendant against the other, or vice versa. So
jurors have to render a verdict on each and every single count. So it's not so they've got to go through every single charge, weigh the evidence that was presented during that trial. And keep in mind too, this trial started in early October with jury selection. So they've been overwhelmed with information, with witness testimony, with evidence such as secretly recorded and videotaped phone calls and video.
And besides all the evidence, the judge's instructions to the jury went over 100 pages. I mean, he would read them one after another, but I think all of us, our eyes are glazing over, and you try to keep with them. But and this judge it makes the reading his delivery is a little more interesting than others. He keeps your attention a little better than others I've seen over the years, but it's just a lot to digest and a lot to go through. And so, you think every day, maybe we're getting closer, but we must be getting closer to something, whether it's a conviction, an acquittal, or a mistrial. But it's been really quiet the last couple of days. The judge even commented yesterday, wow, they're super quiet today. So, but then we need at least expect it. You'll get that note, and then the judge will call, and then there will be a mass, a frenzy to get to the courthouse. The place will fill up. The verdict will be announced, and then everything goes crazy.
Didn't the judge at the beginning of jury deliberations warned everybody who wants to be in the courthouse for the verdict to be within 15 minutes of the courthouse because he's not going to wait an hour or 2 hours for everyone to return to the courthouse. So you've been hanging out at the courthouse, right, Jim?
Yes, exactly. And Michael McLean and his attorneys have stayed in the courthouse. One of McLean's attorneys, John Mitchell, commented in the hallway that, well, our office is about 17 minutes away, so we're here. Now, Madigan's not here. His defense lawyers, the offices of Breen and Pugh, two of his, team of 5 all-stars, they're right kind of kitty corner across the street from the courthouse. Where we see them walking in, if you see our center square and YouTube videos of Madigan coming in, he's coming from the direction of his offices are only, when you start seeing him on the video, he's probably just past halfway here from the office, the building, the venerable building that Breen and Pugh's offices are in. So they're very close, right across the street. Prosecutors have offices here. So yeah, everybody's close, and reporters are, who've been covering this regularly, they're not leaving the courthouse. Everybody's hanging around, and so there's a lot of time for chit chat in addition to working on other things.
Well, I want to dig into that a little bit with you, Jim. Of course, you've been covering this trial since day one, October, but during testimony, during witnesses, etc. There's something to do. You're paying attention. Everybody is. You're writing stories out of it. But man, the past week, there's really no information coming out outside of those notes that you mentioned that aren't really case related, that weren't really case related early on. I know you're doing other work there. You're reporting on other stories as we wait for the jury. But man, it's got to be boring for many people, huh?
I thought it would be worse than it is. But Blakey, the judge, has had other cases. We've heard cases involving accused murderers. We had a sentencing today in there. He had a case, he said status hearings. So he has filled up the courtroom, not filled up, but he's had several things, especially the last couple of days. And there's another trial starting in that courtroom next week. So that he already earlier this week asked Madigan's team, there was a room they were using, and there are a couple of rooms, but one of them they have to shift out of for this other trial. And if this isn't settled by Friday, he wanted them to be out of there by Friday. So he's had other things going on. And then but yeah, for everyone else, Mike McLean walked by us at one point and he commented about a book he's reading with all his free time he has about Winston Churchill. And then another reporter from the Chicago Tribune said, well, he's reading a different book about Churchill. So they compared notes on Winston Churchill a little bit. And so here and there, we'll see people coming in and out. But yeah, other than working out of the stories, it is a different feel because during the testimony, you're kind of on edge, and especially during closing arguments, it was frenetic trying to keep up with. I could have written probably 3,000 words on some of the closing arguments in a day because there were so many lines and so many several dramatic moments, and then all of a sudden you stop and you're just, anything can happen at any minute, but then you've got that. So everyone's kind of on edge a little bit. In fact, when I was up I've kind of split time between the courtroom and that area and the media overflow, which is 7 floors higher. And I was in the media overflow before coming down, for this Illinois in Focus, and a couple of reporters immediately were startled, looked at me, what's going on? I said, I'm just going downstairs to report a podcast. It's not, I don't have any inside information. So there is that tension is still here, even though it's sometimes very calm and quiet, especially down here. The only place we can record or broadcast is on the main level of the lobby, essentially. I'm faced this way with kind of the back of the building behind me because toward the front is the security apparatus. So they're very much like if you go through the TSA in an airport, you've got that same, and so we're not allowed to show any of that with the U.S. Marshals who are all here. Yesterday, a prosecutor I know who works in a different division, he came and was talking to me a little bit about more about a case he had, but then he mentioned how he had seen Amar Bachu in the office and how he's an intense guy, and so all those F-bombs he dropped during his closing arguments are, I guess, not only reserved for that, although he whether you like the language or not, it was quite dramatic in his closing argument. So you do see a little more of the personalities of the lawyers look all of a sudden relaxed after being on edge for going on 4 months.
And of course, you just to close out, you haven't heard from the jurors for at least a couple of days. They're 7 days in. We just have no idea when that verdict could come.
Yeah, there was a pool that reporters started about when we would get a word that there's a verdict, and most are eliminated. And I think there was only one person left who wasn't in this week. So we're down to one or two people left in that pool. And then someone said, well, maybe we'll start a new one if this carries into mid next week. So, it could be any.
Are you?
No, I was. The judge had talked several times in the trial. He mentioned how diligent this jury was. So they were punctual. People didn't miss. There was one juror who had a bad cough early in the trial and didn't miss. And so he's talked about how diligent they were. So, you know what? I think they're going to get through this quickly. So, I was one of the first ones eliminated, if not the first. I really thought they might get through it quickly, but, I was wrong. And it looks like, there's only a few left, or we're all going to be wrong.
We're all anxiously awaiting, of course. Can't push jurors to go faster than what they need to. Jim, there's some breaking news today. Again, we're recording this on Thursday, February 6th. The U.S. Department of Justice today sued the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and Cook County over their sanctuary policies. We've talked about with the new Trump administration coming in and having radically different ideas about illegal immigration than Governor Pritzker has, than Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has, et cetera. So we're not completely surprised by this, but this was a big step by the federal government. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Big news, we kind of knew even before he was, certainly before he was inaugurated and even before he was elected, that Chicago was definitely going to be an area that President Trump and Tom Homan, his borders were going to be keying in on. We didn't necessarily know to this extent, and to come one day after a new attorney general is in place. I'll tell you what, in terms of executive action, we've seen this since the inauguration. Boy, it's been one thing after another. And it'll be very interesting to see if legislation goes that way. That's always a little more challenging. But this complaint, it does name the Governor J.B. Pritzker, as well as Chicago Mayor Johnson. It also names the Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling, and it names, interestingly enough, Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle and Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. And Preckwinkle had a press conference this morning, I think even before this news broke, but she was talking about how Cook County is standing up, against the administration's policies, and she specifically said how the threatening to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are damaging, and how they were going to stand up against this. But she is also named, along with Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. They've both been there a long time, and they've also been again, spending a lot of taxpayer money, both at the county and the city level, and then of course at the state level, in terms of the just dealing with the migrant crisis, and just in general, the housing, healthcare, education, and more, vaccination of residents who are here illegally. And so it's been a lot of money. It's certainly been a hot button issue, and it's not going to change.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that in a second. As a matter of fact, Republican legislators held a news conference earlier this week before this lawsuit was filed by the Department of Justice. Get to that in a second. But the actions by the U.S. Attorney General's office, new Attorney General Pam Bondi, also includes, well, not the lawsuit itself, but she also issued a memo ordering the end of funding to state and local jurisdictions that unlawfully interfere with federal law enforcement operations. I have not seen a number. We have not reported yet, but we should talk to your colleagues, because you're stuck in the Madigan thing, about how much that actually could mean for Chicago, Cook County, and Illinois in terms of dollars lost by this. But this is a big sweeping action by the Trump administration.
It is. And the Justice Department is asking, again, Greg Bishop covering this, asking a judge to declare these state and local laws, we're talking sanctuary, city, county, whatever, state laws, unconstitutional under the federal government supremacy clause. I've always wondered why we have, and it's not just this issue, it's certainly true of, marijuana, for example, still illegal at the federal level, but not only legal in Illinois, but funded by state and county governments. and businesses that deal in it. And so I've always wondered how that incongruence, why that isn't addressed more. Well, here we are with a new president and a new administration. It is being addressed. And if the federal government declares something illegal, how can a state within the union, not go along with that? So that's what part of the essence of this is declaring these state and local laws that are not in congruence with federal law, asking a judge to declare those unconstitutional.
Let's go back to that Republican press conference from earlier in the week, again, before this lawsuit was filed by DOJ. Essentially, House Minority Leader Toni McComey said that this immigration problem, this migrant crisis in the state of Illinois, particularly in Chicago and Cook County, it's costing taxpayers over $1 billion alone on healthcare, shelter, food. You mentioned some of these costs. They want they want these sanctuary policies to end. Essentially, that sending taxpayers can't afford it. While you were waiting on the Madigan jury to return. Oh no, I'm sorry. Our Kevin Bessler covered this story. Tell us just a little bit more about it.
Yes, Kevin did cover it in a separate press conference. Involved three Republican state senators, Jill Tracy, and then also Ariano. Lee Ariano is a new state senator, just elected. I believe he replaced Win Stoller. He was just entered office last month, and also Severson from Cherry Valley in the Rockford area. And Severson also mentioned that $1 billion number, and I don't even know that would include what's spent on things like judicial proceedings and all of that kind of thing. But part of the essence of what Ariano and Severson said is that the governor has been making these disaster proclamations or declarations. Severson said he made his 30th last Friday related to the migrant crises and all of these issues, where then money is allowed to be shifted around without oversight. And so we don't know, according to these lawmakers, we don't know how much is really being spent on non-citizen residents. And so three senators, including John Curran, introduced legislation which would require an annual report to the General Assembly on how much is being spent on non-citizen residents.
Yeah, the lack of accountability behind it is frustrating as a taxpayer myself, and you're a taxpayer too, of course. We should be able to learn how much the real dollar amounts. These are estimates because, of course, the state of Illinois taxpayers are paying a large portion of this. City of Chicago taxpayers, Jim, you're a Chicago city resident. The city is spending lots of money on these migrants, and Cook County residents as well. So, of course, the Republicans are the super minority in the legislature. So the chances of this getting passed are probably not very good. Who knows? But you would think Republicans and Democrats alike can agree on transparency and taxpayers deserving to know what their money's how much money is going to spend on this.
And especially in the wake of this Madigan trial, where we saw a complete lack of transparency and alleged falsification of documents. And so here we are. And yeah, it's that transparency and calling attention to something that, the party in power isn't going to call attention to if it doesn't have to. But we see that this is even in Chicago, as blue as it is, we saw this become a big issue during the budget debate. It was, I guess, in November and December when the residents and the city council stood up and said no to the mayor's property tax increase. And a big part of the arguing from some of the members of the community who would comment in these public city council committee hearings and council meetings was that you're spending all this money on migrants and now you want to tax us. It's not right. And so this is this legislation and the between the Toni McComey event that Kevin Bessler covered and this state senators event with Severson, Ariano, and Tracy, this gets to that at the state level of like, okay, you saw how upset people in Chicago, of all places, were about this, and now expand that statewide, and you've got a lot of money and a lot of, and a lot of concern from the community.
Segueing to another story, Jim, this one from you. New polling is out on Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. Boy, is his approval rating awful.
It really is 14%. Rahm Emanuel became very unpopular late in his second term after the Laquan McDonald case, the young man who was shot by a police officer in Chicago. Lori Lightfoot became very unpopular at the end of her lone term. And was obviously, pushed out quickly in the next election. They got down to, I think, around 27%, maybe even to the mid-20s. But Johnson's at 14%. And of the people who disapprove, a significant majority of them don't just disapprove, they strongly disapprove. Now, the mayor says these are just snippets in time. Yeah, that's true. But now we've had several of these snippets in a row, and the numbers were low a couple of months ago, and now they're really historically low. There hasn't been any mayor in Chicago who's polled this low since they've been doing the polling, which goes back before Richard M. Daley, but after Richard J. to Michael Bilandic, who followed Richard J. Daley, and he never got below 30%, and he was pretty unpopular too. So these are record low numbers for the mayor, and the same poll also showed pretty low numbers, but not quite as low for the Chicago Teachers Union, which is still trying to negotiate a deal with the Chicago Public Schools after the last deal expired last summer. So there's an election in the union for a new president there, a potentially new president there. So the polls may be snippets in time, right, or snapshots, I think, as the mayor said. But boy, these numbers are pretty substantial.
One last thing about the poll, they also asked what voters' top concerns were. Crime, which we'll segue into here in a minute in the short amount of time we have left, was the top issue for Chicago residents. Not a surprise there. High taxes, again, not a surprise. And city governance overall. You don't really see city governance listed in as a top concern of voters. That tells me really that voters are not happy with the job Johnson is doing.
Yeah, I agree to that. I was really surprised by that. Crime being number one didn't surprise me. In Chicago, given our history of approving tax increases, not my history, but collectively, that surprised me that it was number two. I thought the migrant issue would be higher, but migrants was fourth, actually. I thought that would be a higher issue, but crime was one, taxes two, and they were the top two easily. And then, as you said, city governance. And that just, I think people do have that perception that this mayor just isn't getting everyday tasks done in terms of running the city. We haven't had, some of the bedlam that we had in, during the Lightfoot administration when the George Floyd related riots were going on here, but just basic city government. And you see it in social media posts and in some reporting, missing the opportunity for federal funding here, missing a deadline for this, this department having issues, gifts going into a closet at City Hall, things that, there's no allegations right now against the mayor, but just the perception is there that he's not governing the city very well and not able to administer just basic government. The basic functions of government aren't being done very well. So yeah, really some telling stuff in that poll from the Illinois Policy Institute.
We only have seconds left, Jim, so I'm just going to read off. There's another story, speaking of Chicago crime, that we published at thecentersquare.com this week. Chicago residents reported 28,443 violent crimes in 2024, with aggravated assault cases hitting a 20-year high. That was aggravated assault. Aggravated battery cases jumped 3.1%. Was the largest percentage increase for a violent crime category. It's not a surprise that Chicago residents in this poll, among their top concerns, is crime. Jim, good luck with the Madigan trial. I hope you get a verdict sooner rather than later. This doesn't drag into hopefully next week we'll have a definitive verdict. But thank you for joining us today, Jim. Listeners can keep up with all the news we talked about today and more at thecentersquare.com.